staying on the road is all about brands and do they really matter. So when it comes to buying RV parts for your RV, keep in mind it's your RV. You want to take care of it. But we're going to dive into this because the brands, products, brands, all of it combined, the landscape is ever changing. Consumer choices have changed so much. When you go to a grocery store, they're 3-4 times as big as they used to be in the 70s or 80s because of all the expansion of brands. It's not necessarily new products. It's now they got 200 flavors of orange juice, 3,000 different flavors of soda, 900 different types of bread. So things are changing. But we want to explore the shift that's taken place from the classic well-known brands to this rise of these lesser-known counterparts. And we're talking about RV parts here. So do brands still hold the same significance they once did? So pay attention and enjoy the ride because we're going to go back in history a little bit and talk about the transformation. So there was a time you'd go down the highway and you'd see certain signs, maybe it was Burma Shave, an iconic brand, and you'd have the sign and, the 5 signs before it that would say, next stop, pay attention, or whatever they were. I don't remember. Then all of a sudden it says Burma Shave, or you'd see the billboards along the highway for Coca-Cola, Pepsi. You'd pull into a gas station if you were traveling someplace, even locally. The attendant would wait on you, customer service, but he'd probably be sipping on a Coca-Cola or a 7-Up. They'd have the big machine and the glass bottles. And those things kind of gave us a connection, with companies, with people. It reminded us that people are still people. It's changed today. And that was a time where, Gulf stations, Shell, Phillips, they were all over the place. They were smaller. They weren't self-serve, they were full-serve. And you'd wait in your car, and you'd get that full service. You'd get that customer service. So that's how things used to be, where there's a great connection between people and brands and products. But as time or decades have rolled by, there's been these societal shifts where people's needs have changed. But what we've seen also is the decline of some of the classic brands. But not only that, we see the decline of brands in general. And some of it's because of consumer preferences. It's a different person or a different group today. There's increased competition. Some brands that hung on for years or decades get taken over by a bigger company because they got comfortable, like Kmart, for example. Well-known brand. Sears, well-known brand, but they were asleep at the wheel and they lost their relevance. But those are brands you could connect with. Oh, yeah, there's a Kmart store. You'd be in another town. It kind of reminds you of home in a way. Things like that. And some of these shifts have paved the way for newer brands, potentially higher quality, but not always. Some of these supposed new and improved products that have hit the scene really aren't new and improved. And when certain products go away, it kind of leaves a vacuum out there where there's nothing there to replace it. And that even happens in the RV industry. As small as it is compared to everything else, you can have a little vacuum. A certain product gets discontinued by a manufacturer that was on, hundreds of thousands of RVs. Now it's not there, but you have hundreds of thousands out there and they need replacement parts. So it just goes away unless someone's innovative and decides, hey, I want to make a part for that, because there's so many of them. But that doesn't happen all the time. It just means you take it off and you upgrade and buy a new one. And quite often, you have to put on another lesser-known brand or something that's similar but not quite the same. So now if we get to RV parts in our modern era, we fast forward to the year 2024. So we're navigating a world filled with flying cars and space shuttles. I'm exaggerating. That's not yet. That'll be a future episode, maybe 2025, no. So we're not there yet. We don't have that landscape. But instead we have a society that's really, we've lost the sounds of traditional shopping. Like malls are empty anymore, comparatively speaking to years ago. And people walking in a mall, the sound of their footsteps has really been replaced by the clicks and scrolls of online shopping. So it's a time where metaphorically we find ourselves in a digital cafeteria sorting through the offerings of various online markets. Now, if we zoom in on the world of RV parts, we're witnessing the proliferation of low quality and sometimes dangerous products. And they're being pushed at the top of some of the online marketplaces, or they're being pushed to the top. And some of these products actually work their way into RV stores because an RV store might say, oh, look how cheap that is. We can buy that and resell it in our store. And I've seen it, firsthand, people doing this, RV stores. So you have to be cautious sometimes. But, there's other markets have experienced this over the decades. They've experienced in like home appliances, car parts. There's so many. It goes on and on, technology. But we've worked our way through it, and we kind of realize, well, this particular brand or this no-name thing is what I'm going to stay away from. So we've experienced, but it's still fairly new to the RV world. So now let me give you some examples, kind of set the stage there. So first one would be toilet valves for RV toilets. So it's the water valve where the water line goes into, you push the pedal to flush it or twist the hand lever, and water's going to fill the bowl and so forth. There's a lot of brands of these now. It used to just be Thetford and Sealand, and then Dometic bought Sealand, so now it's Thetford, Sealand, Dometic, and Valterra had a toilet out there for a while. Camco has a toilet now. Lippert has a toilet, but let's just stick with the main stuff that Thetford and Dometic made, or Sealand made, actually. So now you can get replacements for those for 25% of the price, 15% of the price. And are they any good? No, they're not. They're low quality. In fact, we have bought a lot of these things and tested them, and they don't work. And they're just a low quality product, because sometimes it's replacing a product that already has a lot of problems, like a Dometic 310 toilet valve or 300 series. Those things fail all the time. And so someone will knock that off and they say it's an improved, but it's not. It's just the same thing or worse. And generally it's worse because it's lower quality. They're trying to sell something for, $15 on one of these websites when it really should be at least $60 or $40 or something. Think about that. $15 with free shipping. How much do you think that thing costs them to make? How much money are they making? Especially if they're paying fees to the website. Then, you can go into electrical cords, adapters, and replacement ends for power cords for RVs. Not only, does it cause little problems because they don't work that well, they don't work the same, but also you're using 110 volts or 220 volts, and that can cause a fire, burn down your RV, burn down your house, burn down your neighbor's house, burn down someone's RV that's plugged in at your house. They're using one of your cords that you got on one of these places dirt cheap. And I bring this up because we've also seen those. People come in with cord ends, want us to replace it and put it on a power cord for them. I have a friend who bought all this stuff on one of these websites, and all of it was pure garbage. It took him, 4 or 5 times longer to put a cord end on than it would have if he just bought a good one from one of the major brands. People that have been doing it for a long time, and they're in it for the long haul. There's hundreds of these no-name brands, or it seems like hundreds on these websites that just kind of pop up out of nowhere. They don't have a website. You can't find this product anywhere but on that website. It's like the company doesn't exist, and it probably doesn't, because it's somebody in another country selling to his cousin here who's selling on this website, and that's it. There is no real backlash there. There's no accountability. So with power cords, not only can they be harder to use or put together, but adapters, lower quality, they'll have a tendency of burning up, failing quicker. And these are fire hazards when it comes to 110, 112, or 220 volts. Now, another one that's interesting are wire connectors. Now, you might think, okay, Eric, you've gone off your rocker now. Wire connectors, who cares? And, in some regards, I understand that because that's how I felt, wire connectors, who cares? But you go to some of these websites, the bigger ones, and they'll have all these different types or, brands of wire connectors. You've never heard of one of them. Not one of them. They're not mainstream. They're just cheap. You get 5,000 connectors for like $19. It's just absolutely cheap. But what happens is when you take these connectors and you compare them with a good brand, like maybe what Home Depot sells, or a store, a electrical supply company, even auto parts stores sell better quality ones. So you take, let's say, just a butt connector, you're going to connect two wires together. You have a crimper, you crimp it down on both ends with the cheap brand you got off one of these websites. Now, if you're doing it right, you would pull on it anyways. You always do that whenever you crimp a wire to test it. Now, on the cheap ones, the wire is just going to pull out. On the good ones, it's not going to pull out. The crimps work better. And, I've experienced this firsthand because I've bought some of these cheap ones. Like, well, gosh, it takes like 4 connectors to get a good crimp. And you're always pulling it. It pulls right off. It's like, wow, this is ridiculous. It must be me. I've been crimping for decades. Since I was a kid, doing wire connections and things. And so then, you start to realize, is it the brand? And actually, this came to my attention from a video on YouTube. I'm not going to say the name of the person, but there's a YouTube on this stuff, and it really shows it in depth how poor it is. And the same person did a video on fuses that you can buy on these online marketplaces, 12-volt fuses. So we're past the connectors. Buy good quality ones, unless you want to just go through them. They're cheap enough where you can just check and double check and make sure the crimps work. But remember, every time a crimp fails, generally you have to cut the wire off, and then that wire is going to get shorter. So depending on what you're working on, you don't want the wire to get too short. You need to have some space there. Okay, so now fuses are another issue. You can buy these cheap fuses, and you're thinking, come on, fuses have been around for decades as well. They should have this figured out, right? Well, if you take a 2-amp fuse from these marketplaces, and this isn't painting a brush for every single one, but it paints the picture for there's a problem out there. So this particular person in his video took a 2-amp fuse, and he tested it. And this guy's an electrical genius. So it wasn't just some schmuck like me doing in his garage. This is electrical genius, knows what he's doing. So he's putting a load on the fuse at 2 amps, the fuse doesn't blow. Increases the load to 4 amps, the fuse doesn't blow. Okay, at 2 amps, that's fine, but now it's at 4 amps, the fuse doesn't blow. So he says, well, let's give it a minute. Maybe it's a slow blow fuse. He was being sarcastic. So he went to the bathroom, and his video ran the entire time. Went and got a cup of coffee. He comes back 10 minutes later, and the fuse hasn't blown. He puts another 2-amp load on it. Now we're at 6 amps. The fuse hasn't blown. Now this is a 2-amp fuse. He puts another load on it of 2 more amps, making it 8 amps, and it finally blows. So you think about that. How many devices or components can get ruined because a fuse won't blow? That's the point of the fuse, to stop problems, to save the thing that the fuse is there. And maybe it's a stereo or a light. It's there for a purpose. Some people just bypass fuses, just take them out, or run stuff without fuses. You have to have fuses. And now this is 12 volts, so it's not like it's 110 volts, but you can still get a small fire. You can ruin devices connect to it. The wires can burn up. Things can happen. So now on a 15-amp fuse, if it doesn't blow at 15 amps, but only blows at, let's say, 25 amps, you got a bigger problem. Or 30 amps, you got a gigantic problem. So you have to be cautious with these things. Buy named brand fuses like Bussmann. They've been around forever. They're in the automotive industry. They're a good brand, trustworthy. They're probably more expensive, but isn't it worth it knowing that you actually have a fuse that's going to blow when it's supposed to? So you can look at all these different things, and see, you have to make good decisions. Sewer hoses, water hoses, propane hoses. The things that are sold on some of these online marketplaces are garbage. They might work for a bit, but they don't work for a long time. Now, I was brought up in an era where you buy it once, you buy it good, and you're done with it, rather than keep buying a cheap one. What's the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing and getting the same results. That's insanity. So we don't want to be insane. We want to buy good products. So we're coming to the end here of, talking about this. But when you're shopping, think about brand loyalty. Now, not every brand is going to be a rock solid brand either. I'm not saying that, but we have to be cautious of the no-name brands. The brands that aren't good, we're already aware of them. So we're witnessing a lasting shift of valuing low quality products and low quality innovation over brand recognition. So it's just like a child who's contemplating the school cafeteria's mystery lunch. The consumers face a similar dilemma when they're online shopping. Are we knowingly consuming the metaphorical equivalent of cafeteria garbage in our digital shopping carts? It's a valid concern, but we don't need to fear about this. The online marketplaces are changing, but there's still some hidden gems out there. There's places where you can go online who prioritize customer service and curate selections of high-quality products. So as we navigate the virtual cafeteria of consumer choices, let's remember not all online platforms serve garbage. In this digital age, discerning shoppers can find reputable online markets that continue to uphold standards of excellence. There's not a lot of them. They're going away, but they're there. All right, Alexis, wake up.
I'm awake, don't worry.
All right. Alexis is sick, so she's, over there dozing off, got her pillow out. Okay, so I hope that helps everybody. It's not to bash all these places online. It's just to make you aware of the products out there that are not good. And don't spend your money on it. Having a brick and mortar business gets an advantage in a lot of this because we see it firsthand. And we can experiment with it because it's part of what we do. But when people come in and they buy something, I just bought this on such and such, and it's already failed, Do you have one that's better? Well, of course we do, because that is just the cheap online garbage like you get in a school cafeteria. All right, so now I want to ask everybody who's listening to this podcast to share this with your friends, family members, anybody that owns an RV that might have interest. We're trying to up our online presence. We have grown quite a bit on YouTube, and we've grown in our podcast, but we want to keep this momentum going in 2024. We want to reach some new heights. So please share it with others. All the episodes have value to them. It might not fit what you need at the moment, but it will sooner or later. I used to listen to a show driving a lot about gardening. I wasn't into gardening. Never have been, never will be. But every now and then I pull a little rabbit out of my hat of something I heard on that show, So it pays off.